Welcome back to the Tiga Tactics Podcast, a show about self-defense for civilians by civilians. We discuss all things personal protection, including martial arts, combat sports, and street combatives. Our resident MANs, martial arts nerds, include co-founder of Tiga Tactics and black belt holder in 4 different styles, Patrick Vuong.
Greetings, my fellow martial arts geeks.
And we do not have the other co-founder, Dr. Conrad Bui, on this week. He is busy. I think he's off on vacation. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, he's traveling across the globe, so he's not able to jump on.
Is it a martial arts vacation or is it just like an actual vacation?
It is actually a real vacation where he will not be punching or kicking anybody.
That's disappointing. That's disappointing. We'll let it slide though.
Yes, we will.
Anyway, I'm your other co-host, now retired Army Special Forces soldier and champion obstacle course racer, Evan Ultra-OCR Man Perperis. So welcome back to another episode. And today we're going to be talking about, we got the Christmas season coming up, holiday season, and we want to talk about present ideas, right? Like I think every time how the holidays roll around, Christmas rolls around, or people's birthdays, you start like, all right, well, what do I buy this person? And if you're a martial arts fan, I think this will be a great episode for you to add some stuff to your own personal list. If you have to buy for someone who's a martial arts fan, this is some good ideas for you. And if your spouse has no idea what to get you, you send her this podcast link or him this podcast link, and
Right.
they listen to it, and you're like, 5 minutes and 35 seconds, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Right. I would say that you do not need the holidays as an excuse to buy a martial artist anything martial arts or self-defense related. But but yes, this is a great time to look at these different options.
So the way we're going to break it down is we're going to use the Tiga Tactics Pyramid of Personal Protection here as our format, as our guidance principle here. So we're going to be talking about mindset. So good products to get in that mindset category, skill set, and then tool set. So 3 different categories. And then generally we're going to try to go from like low to high price, right? So maybe the low stuff is stocking stuffers if it's an immediate family member, or maybe if it's like a acquaintance or coworker, that's something you buy. So kind of keep it on the lower price range, and then kind of medium price range, maybe more for someone you're a little close to, and then we'll do high price range, right? Maybe that's something you get for a spouse or a very close friend, and then like very high price range, like I don't know, anniversary stock, like something big, right? Something where it's
Mhm.
like that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So kind of like looking at, I don't know, I think like 150 plus range for that, up till I don't know, however much money you want to spend on martial arts stuff, which is infinite. You can spend infinite amount.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start off with mindset, and I'm gonna send it over to you, Patrick, and give me your first suggestion on what you would buy someone if you want to improve their mindset for combatives, martial arts, combat sports type stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And if the listener is new to us or to Tika Tactics or to this podcast, the big thing that we emphasize is mindset. Out of the 3 sets of self-defense or personal protection, the mindset is the biggest thing. So, if possible, you should be spending most of your time and money on this category. But to make it easier and more friendly, user friendly for our listeners, I'll just start with the cheapest, quote unquote, the cheapest present that you can give somebody, which is, to me, not to date myself, but it would be magazines. It would be martial arts magazines, self defense magazines. In the martial arts category, unfortunately, most of the martial arts magazines are now dead, like dinosaurs, which
Yeah.
breaks my heart, because that's, aside from Bruce Lee movies and watching my cousin Conrad, my other co-founder, doing martial arts magazines is really what got me hooked. And things like uh, Inside Kung Fu and Karate Illustrated, those are all dead. But fortunately, there's still Black Belt magazine. It's the last one. It was the first martial arts magazine in America, and it's now the last one, unfortunately, as far as I know. There are still some that print periodically, but Black Belt's still around. It's not printing monthly anymore. It's not even printing quarterly. But it did make a comeback recently. So they did recently print a hard copy magazine, which was awesome. They're obviously online.
And it stopped for a while. They stopped printing hard copies for a while. It was just digital.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So they recently got purchased by a new owner. His name is actually Master George Chung. who is very famous in the traditional martial arts combat sports world, uh, especially in the late 80s. Um, and so his company bought it, and so now he's reviving it, thankfully. Otherwise, I think it might have also gone like the dodo bird. So I would say, uh, get a Black Belt magazine subscription. I don't know exactly how many issues that will get you, but it's a great way to develop a defensive mindset. I don't know. Would you agree, Evan?
Yeah, I would agree. And you don't necessarily, maybe you're not ready to commit to a full subscription, or that's above your price range, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
just buy one magazine, right? You can even buy back issues, right? They sell back issues
Mm-hmm.
online. If you know the person, like I know, like Tim Kennedy, I think's been on there. If you know the
Mm-hmm.
person loves like special forces combative stuff, you buy him that. Or if he's a Wing Chun guy, maybe you buy one with a Wing Chun guy on the cover.
Mm-hmm.
So you can pick and choose.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then if martial arts is not their thing, maybe they're more focused into um, reality based self defense, things like that. Then you can also look at my my former magazines: Recoil magazine, Concealment magazine, Off Grid magazine. I used to be a senior editor on those magazines. I still write for them, and they're still, the team there is still producing some of the best literature in the self defense world. They are obviously Recoil and Concealment magazine are focused on firearms, but it's a lifestyle magazine, so it's not just about the gun review. They also talk about all the other things that go along with that, which is the training, the the accessories that you need, the laws, the legalities. So it definitely helps inform your mindset when you're reading all about the entire lifestyle of self defense. And then Off Grid Magazine is slightly leaning more towards survivalism, both urban and also wilderness survival. So that's also a great magazine. And I was the head editor of that one for many years. So I'm going to throw that out there for all of you. How about you, Evan? What do you suggest?
So real quick, I've bought Off Grid and Recoil in the past before I knew who you were or before I had any association with you,
Mm-hmm.
and I've saved a couple of them because like some of them were like kind of very niche topics, kind of focused on like disaster type stuff and like zombie themed. And you're in those magazines, which I think is really funny that I bought this years before I met you.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I found one on the shelf and I was like, oh, let's see if Patrick's in here. There he is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I try, the cool thing, obviously things become trendy. And so I would say, I don't know, 8 years ago, the whole idea of like zombie apocalypse was really cool and hip because Walking Dead was huge
Yeah,
then. And so, we kind of lean into that, but at the same time, there's still really some practical information, like just simple stuff that even unfortunately my friends and family don't even think of, is just having emergency water. You know,
right.
if there's a massive blackout or your local water supply gets contaminated with chemicals, what are you going to do? Right? Let's say the gas isn't working, you can't boil water anymore. Well, now you're screwed. We've seen that happen in Michigan and all these other states due to either poor management, infrastructure management, or a storm, or natural disaster, and people just don't have drinking water. So these magazines are great because it changes your mindset. It makes you realize like, hey, I should probably be more prepared.
Yeah. And I like that as like really weird like zombie themed stuff. I think it's a way to get people maybe interested in training who aren't necessarily interested in training, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like instead of presenting it as like, oh, the world's gonna end, you're like, well, the world's not gonna end because there's some people who like that. But if you're like, hey, if you want to learn how to fight zombies, now I'm gonna teach you some martial arts skills
Right.
and I'm gonna teach you some survival stuff. I know when the probably about 10 or 15 years ago, the CDC, Center for Disease Control, before they I feel like everything got political around that name.
Mm-hmm.
They released a comic book about zombie preparedness, and it was just like it was I don't know, it was maybe 20 pages, and I think you could probably find it online still, and it talked about how to prepare for the zombie apocalypse. And they're like, we don't think the zombie apocalypse is coming, but this is a way to get young readers involved in thinking about disaster preparedness and safety and first aid and stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember reading that. That was really cool.
So speaking of reading, I'm gonna go with the broad category of books, right?
Mm-hmm.
Books typically $10 to $30 for most of them, and there's just so many great books out here. So I'm not gonna list like all of them. I'll give you like my kind of top three that are self-defense,
Mm-hmm.
real world practicality focused that I did not personally write. So, uh, so the first one is Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker. which
Mm.
I just think that's a really good book, especially it's good for everyone, but especially for females. It talks about trusting your intuition and then kind of like those warning signs you see that you may not consciously be going to the front of your mind, but like they're there, which is why you have that uneasy feeling. And I think that's just a really phenomenal book. Um, Second one is When Violence is the Answer by Tim Larkin. Another really good book. Again, talking about when is it appropriate to use violence, uh, essentially to defend yourself. And then the third one is basically anything by Rory Miller. So Rory Miller
Hmm.
was a correctional officer for a while, and his content is just really good. He's got a couple different books. I think Meditations on Violence is one of them,
Hmm.
and they all have like of violence in the name. But anything by Rory Miller, I would recommend. I've Every time he comes out with something new, I pick it up. It's very good stuff.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. I would just to piggyback off of that. Actually, one of the books that I would recommend is a book called "Run If You Can, Destroy If You Must."
Oh,
And
good one.
and not just because I wrote the foreword in that book, but it's also because it's written by you, Evan.
That's right. Yeah. Uh,
Tell us a little bit about what the main theme of it is.
it's the runner, walker, and hiker's guide to self-protection, self-defense. So it uses the Tiga tactics methodology, and then I kind of deep dive into protecting yourself. So just like we're talking about now, a lot of it's focused on mindset. So you get a while before you actually get into like any actual technique. And then it talks about, the technique and like what to carry and considerations to carry for any tool, right? So whether you're if you want to carry a knife or a gun or pepper spray, it talks about different criteria to look at them through. And I think you can use that lens only for running and walking, but everyday life, and then even like I've used military stuff, right? There's some weapon systems that we had that were super effective. They were
Mhm.
just incredibly inconvenient, right? Like the Barrett 50 cal on deployments, super effective, right? Shoots these gigantic rounds, but I think I carried it twice on deployment, and the only time I remember we basically used it as a show of force because having this giant sniper rifle on top of a roof is scary to people. So we used it for that. We didn't actually do anything with it because it was very inconvenient. So I share that story because that's kind of how I look at some self-defense tools. Like, is it accessible? Is it effective? And is it convenient? And you need to kind of balance those, and everyone's going to be a little bit different. So one of the guys who's in our Tiga Tactics training group is like he messaged me after buying the book, and he's like, I thought it was going to be just like a review of like normal Tiga Tactics, the other stuff that I've seen online, because I guess he's
Mhm.
taken most of the courses, if not all.
Mhm.
And he's like, oh, he was like so much additional information in there that I hadn't thought of or I hadn't seen before. So he's like, he basically said it was really good, not only to review some of the Tiga Tactics material, but then to like bring in some new stuff, and I pull in some military acronyms and some mindset stuff from that as well. So
Yeah, I thought it was a brilliant. That's one of the things that I'm really impressed about with you, Evan, and that both Connor and I are very impressed. Is that you have this very diverse very diverse understanding of human combat. Basically, I'm not just talking about like punching, kicking, but everything because of your very different backgrounds. You've got the military, you've got the martial arts, you've got the combat sports, and so when you bring all that knowledge together into a specific topic like running, survival for runners, it's very enlightening because you look at things from a very different. I shouldn't say different perspective. You have multiple perspectives. So I really love your book. Uh,
thank you.
it's one of the things that I'm going to be, gifting to my family members. Again, not to be sexist or anything, but to the my nieces and my sister. I'll have my wife read it. It's just very enlightening.
Thank you. Yeah. That it's a relatively quick read. I think it's just over I think it's like 115, 120 pages, something like
Mhm.
that. So it's not like something you're gonna have to slog through. It's got a bunch of pictures in there too. So um
Yeah.
if you're gonna speaking of my books, if you're gonna buy my books, that's the number for if you listen to this podcast, that's the number one I'd recommend. Number two I'd recommend would be Ultra-OCR Man. So that's my biography. It talks about you get some more war stories in there, you get some ultra distance obstacle course racing, some mindset stuff about being persistent and pushing through your limits when things are really hard. That's very like story format. And then the third one, if I had to pick a top three, I would pick the Sponsored Athlete, which just talks about getting essentially producing content and getting benefits from it. So, it may not make you money, but it will help reduce costs in doing something that may be primarily a hobby. And I've done it with obstacle course racing, where I essentially generate income, and then I do it to a lesser degree with martial arts, where it helps me save some money here and there as I go about and do different training.
Yeah, that's a really smart way of thinking about it. As Conrad and I were talking about this separately. He's like, man, we didn't think about that because Conrad has been training even longer than I have. He's been doing it for 40 plus years, and he spent tens of thousands of dollars on martial arts, combat sports, and things like that. And he said that if he had the knowledge that you offered in that book, he could have saved a lot of money because over time everything's just costly. Whether
It
it's
adds up. Yeah.
yeah, whether it's the uniforms, the tools, the actual courses, things like that, it adds up. So it's great information.
And I've got a recommendation for gifts for skill set that relates to this book, but I'm going to hold off on that until we get to that point.
Okay, yeah,
Um,
let's finish up the mindset section. So just again, piggyback off of what you said, Evan, the number one book that I usually recommend for people who are self defense minded is Meditations on Violence. I agree with you. Rory Miller is just, it's not just the topics and the knowledge that he has, but it's also his writing style is actually really easy to read. It gets you thinking. As a writer myself, like a trained professional writer, I really like everything that he brings: the writing style, the structure of it, the knowledge itself. I remember when I was kind of making that transition from being just a traditional martial artist to teaching reality-based self-defense. When I read that book, it blew my mind away because it made me realize that people on the street do not attack you the way that we train in the dojo. And then that book was partly why I started doing a lot of research on YouTube. And coincidentally, Conrad had already been doing all that stuff since YouTube debuted in 2005. And so we were kind of on this trajectory that paralleled each other. And I would say that Rory Miller is a big reason for that. Just enlightening, very scary. He's a corrections officer, and so he talks a lot about his experiences working with hardened criminals, but also on the street too. He writes about a few instances of when he was in his youth and that kind of thing. How he had a few very near was it called near misses with violent
yeah.
situations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
He,
uh,
he pretty funny in his book. He's got some stories where like I felt like I related one to one to,
mhm.
talking about like things you should and shouldn't do when dealing with prisoners. And like some of the talks like talked about doing things like in hindsight, he looked back and he was like, that was stupid and risky. And I'm glad it didn't bite me in the butt. And I like stories from deployments where like I'm like, yeah, like that really wasn't the best decision. Uh, everything worked out fine, but like
Mhm.
in hindsight, I shouldn't have done like I shouldn't have been clearing houses with me and three Iraqis who I barely know in the like and my guys are a building or two away, but like
Yeah.
I've done it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I think it's enlightening for anybody to read Meditations on Violence, regardless of their background. The other book that I would recommend that we haven't talked about yet is the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, or the Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee. um, it's not going to be a crazy enlightening read, not but not for the reasons that you're thinking. The real reason is that Bruce Lee didn't intend to publish this book the way that it
yeah,
is. Basically, he died, and so his family decided to publish it because everybody was all everybody's like, oh my god, Bruce Lee's dead, and it became like a Bruce Lee craze, and so they said, hey, let's share the knowledge that he had, but he never intended to publish it the way that it is now. So it's kind of incomplete, so to speak. It's really more just like a collection of his thoughts.
yep.
So it would have been awesome if he had survived and like actually published it the way that he wanted. But anyway, that was also I remember reading that when I was, I don't know, like 12 or 13, and that really expanded my understanding of martial arts, specifically martial arts. It's not so much a reality based type self defense book, but if you're a martial artist or you're uh, at least interested in martial arts or Bruce Lee, it's a must read basically.
Yeah, it's like a major piece of history too. So
Mm-hmm.
I wish I actually knew that's what it was before I read. That was like one of the first books I read when I started reading martial arts books. And I remember reading it and being like, this guy is not a good writer. It's just like disconnected thoughts.
Right.
And then like years later, someone's like, oh, it's unpublished notes that they collected. And I was like, this makes more sense. Like I
Yeah.
wish I should probably reread it with that like lens in mind
Hmm.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Last one I'll kind of throw in for mindset is something I know Conrad has talked about on the podcast before, but anything that kind of reminds you to be self-aware. So I'm going to use the Tiga Tactics merchandise off the Tiga Tactics website, but doesn't necessarily have to be that. It's something, it could be a sticker, it could be a patch, it could
Mhm.
be a t-shirt, something small that reminds you to be self-protection focused, right? So Tiga Tactics is a great example of stuff, but you can also, maybe you like UFC or something. You want to buy someone a UFC t-shirt, a UFC keychain, and that's the mental reminder like, hey, I have to theoretically be ready to fight if I need to. Or maybe the person's already aggressive and maybe it's a keychain that says calm down and walk away. Like,
Right.
whatever it may be, something so like something small like that, keychain, sticker, patch, something like that to remind you to be self-protection focused as you leave the house.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, we've if you go to ticatax.com, we offer a bunch of t-shirts with our slogans. So we have the run if you can, destroy if you must. We have three-stage mindset, which is the stay alert, stay humble, stay kind. Um, yeah, we have all kinds of slogans. Safety is illusion is a big one that I like to say to people because that when I say that, it for non-martial artists, they freak out. They're like, "What? Are you like a anarchist?" I'm like, no, it's just a good reminder that you could walk across the street, get hit by a bus, and so the T-shirt is like a daily reminder of you should always be prepared.
All right, let's jump over to skill set unless you got something.
No, no, yeah, yeah. Let's do skill set. Yeah,
All right, so I'll throw it over to you first. What do you have that's more skill set focused? And there is some overlap anytime you all of these a little bit like bleed into each other, but
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. This skill set it starts once you get into skill set, things get more expensive. There really is no cheap option as a gift unless you sign up one of your relatives or loved ones to like a free trial class to a local martial arts gym or dojo. Some schools offer like a week-long trial. You don't have to pay anything. They teach you maybe 3 classes for free. They let you borrow a uniform, and that is a great way to get your foot in the door, so to speak. If you've never done any sort of physical self-defense martial arts training, that would be a great gift for a relative. So obviously for kids, that you don't know if you should put them in taekwondo or karate or Brazilian jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai. So that free trial class or classes will be a great gift for them.
and that's a really easy one, especially if it's like a week long trial. You
Mm-hmm.
could you could essentially write on a coupon, a piece of paper, and be like, 1 week free trial to Taekwondo with
Mm-hmm.
me, your spouse, or with me, your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And you can attend, and that's like an experience that you can have with someone that literally requires no money,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's a gift. That's an easy gift. You can literally make it on a 3x5 piece of paper, put it in their, envelope, put it in their stocking, and that's one less gift you have to purchase. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm gonna go with something similar, but from I'm gonna say it from your perspective as the person requesting a gift.
Mm.
So essentially, a 1 month, paying for 1 month of training at your local gym. So that's gonna be a little bit more pricey, probably anywhere between $100 and $250 depending on location and how many classes they offer.
Mm-hmm.
And the one kind of caveat I would do with that is a technique I use from the Sponsored Athlete book, where essentially when someone gifts that to you, you provide them feedback, right? So you send them like pictures of yourself training, or you send them updates, or maybe they cover the cost for a month, but then you send them updates throughout the full year, like, hey, I really appreciate your gift. Here's what I just earned the new belt. I
Mm.
just competed in the local tournament and got this place because of because your month of training of membership helps contribute to my success. So it's a way to cut costs. It's a way if you already have a lot of stuff in your house, it's a way to avoid clutter, and
Right.
it's a way to have your family or your friends be part of that community that's building you up and making you a better martial artist.
That's a fantastic. I didn't even think of doing that. That's such a great, cool idea. It gets people involved. Like it kind of reaffirms, like, yeah, I gave this gift and it was a good one, because so I've gotten so many gifts, like, I don't know, like a t-shirt that they think is a cool martial arts t-shirt, but it's super lame. I don't want to say what it is because I don't want to call anybody who's giving me these lame gifts. But you know that those things exist, and so reinforcing it and showing that you've progressed because of their gift,
Yeah.
that's really cool.
And I mean, you could do it for all 12, you could do it the entire year, right? Maybe you have a large extended family who likes to give more expensive gifts and you get the whole year covered and then you create a text chain and you send up out one update a month, right? So you're not
Right.
blowing up their inbox, but you're still providing that feedback.
Yeah.
Essentially, my daughter does competitive dance and they've done some fundraisers and the people who donate to the fundraiser, my wife takes a text chain and sends
Mm.
them updates every time she has a competition. So
Oh, that's so cool. That's a
yeah.
great idea.
And I stole that from obstacle course racing, from this what I put in the sponsored athlete book. Like
Mm.
that's where I stole the idea from. I
Awesome.
stole it from myself.
Right, right. So speaking of which, you actually do offer something that is more affordable. We don't quite have to get into the $200 a month range yet, but
Yeah,
you do have a Patreon page. Tell us
yeah. I
about
do have a Patreon page. So there's a $5 a month and a $10 a month level, and then there's like a $35 a month level. I dumped so many videos on there, basically one a day since September, right? So there's already so much content on there that it's going to take you a hot minute to get through. So,
that.
again, I put it behind the paywall just to kind of keep people who aren't really interested in learning out and to provide a way to kind of continue to motivate me to continue to produce videos. But yeah, $5 or $10 a month, super easy. And if they don't like it, you turn it off after a month. It's not a then that's an easy button, and you're gonna get a lot of really good information for a very low price. So
Yeah, yeah, and again, just a reminder for our listeners, Evan is not just a lifelong martial arts enthusiast uh, and combat sports athlete, but he's also a special forces soldier, well, retired, and so he brings a lot of that real world experience. And to me, that's what makes it so valuable. Is again, you've got such a wide array of knowledge and perspective that it makes the content you're giving people really, really valuable. If I've seen Patreon pages where it's a dude who's only done, say, Filipino martial arts, and that's the only thing he can give you, and he's saying this is the best self defense system ever. You kind of you take it with a grain of salt, right? Because he's only
right,
done one system, but because you have a very diverse background, I find it much more valuable.
appreciate it. And I've got some other great things coming out, not only on Patreon, but I got some other books in the work. Conrad is reading, has a pre-read of one of them right now, and I just sent another friend a pre-read of a different one, and we'll get those over to you at some point, Patrick. Forget your opinion. I want to make some more edits before I send them over to you.
Sure, sure.
As an editor, I feel self-conscious when I send these.
Right, right, yes. No, no, your writing is great, and so it's exciting. I know what the topics are for those books, so I'm excited. I won't reveal it, but I'm excited to read those. And yeah, pretty much everything you put out is going to be valuable to a self defense enthusiast.
And similar to Conrad, I've spent a fair amount of money on things, doing a lot of the money and spending and time, so you don't have to. So I'm kind of giving you just like Tiga Texas, give you that condensed version, and here are paths to choose if depending on what you want to focus on. But it helps it helps explain the paths ahead of time, so you don't have to spend a lot of time invested doing the research and money yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
for this one, I'm going to go with a present I got a couple of years ago, which I still kind of enjoy. What's the actual name of it? It's a boxing tool. It's essentially like a headband with like an elastic string on it and a ball at the end, and you just practice kind of punching the ball. And
Mm-hmm.
they're about $30. I think they're called Reflex Ball Set. You can find them on Amazon. And when I was training in my garage, a lot of times I would, in between sets as I'm like recovering, I would put that little guy on and kind of hit the ball, keep myself amused, while basically like working on it, some reflexing and timing and stuff like that.
Right, right,
Um, in between either lifting weights or in between actual like working sets. So basically use that as like an active form of recovery. Yeah,
right,
30
right.
bucks. Kind of fun. You don't need a whole lot of space to do it. You can do it in an apartment. Um, yeah, obviously there's limitations on what it's good for, but I think it doesn't take up a lot of space and it's kind of fun to do. So
Very cool. Very cool. For my next recommendation, I'm gonna jump in price quite a bit, so hopefully that's okay. We can always go back to the mid range,
okay,
well, I guess if you get it like a traditional heavy bag, maybe a 50 pounder, they're not too expensive. You could get them at affordable sporting goods stores like Big Five Sporting Goods or maybe even Dick's Sporting Goods. There's a ton of sporting goods stores out there, or you can go to here in my area. There's Play It Again Sports, which sells used equipment, and just get a heavy bag. I would recommend getting the heaviest one possible. But if you don't have the weight support structure to put it, in your rafters or what or have you, then get a 50 pounder. It's definitely better than hitting air, because that was when I was a teen and I was doing the traditional martial arts. That's all we did was hit air. We didn't. A lot of these schools that I went to didn't have equipment, so we weren't even hitting focus mitts. I don't even remember having focus mitts. So when I started hitting a heavy bag, it was immediate lightning, because I almost broke my wrist, and I thought, oh wow, this is what it's like to actually hit something solid. And then the traditional martial arts, my traditional martial arts got better because I realized what I'm doing with each strike.
yeah, I agree. I think it is there's some solutions they sell online are like small. I sometimes worry about someone's like, oh, you just strap it to this metal pole, you punch it, and like, yeah, but what if it slides out of the way? I mean, I've seen those YouTube videos where people like punch the wall,
Right, right.
because they try to go with like cheapo solution. So I would like actual bag. If you have the money, uh, the Bob versus to me is I think that's the best from Century Martial Arts. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's just the best tool, right? And you have the space, right? It's got legs, it's got arms, it's got a face.
Yep.
Especially for guys who do like blade work training, or even just like basic grappling and punching. Like there are now arms in your way when
Mm-hmm.
you are trying to strike.
Right.
So you have to parry the arms out of the way. You have to move around the arms. So the Bob versus it's about 550. Obviously that's a really big gift.
Yeah.
But again, if maybe on your list you put, contribute money for my Bob versus,
Mm-hmm.
and people send in $20 or $30 or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for those of you who don't know what a Bob versus is, Bob stands for body opponent bag, and it's basically this mannequin made out of rubber, and it looks like a real person, and you can strike him, and it gives you a very realistic target.
I love that thing. I use that thing so much.
Yeah, it's really cool. I have the original Bob, so he doesn't have any arms or legs, but just having a face makes a big difference, because if you've ever done, our listeners have ever done our Tiga Tactics course, one of our main strikes is what we call the eye wash, which is an attack to the eyes. And having a Bob actually makes you realize why we don't do spears or eye jabs. We do an eye wash, which is more of a relaxed. It's more like a move as opposed to a strike, and it's meant to distract the person. Of course, we could damage the eyes with them, but it's much more. Our hands are much more relaxed. Think of it more like a relaxed tiger claw, as opposed to like I'm pointing my fingers into a spear form. Because when I hit Bob the first few times, I was like, "Ooh, man, that really hurts my hand." And now think about hitting someone's skull, which is way harder than soft
Way hard.
rubber.
Yeah, the Bob's pretty soft, and if you're hurting your hand on the Bob, that's a good sign. Like, hey, maybe this would not be the right thing to do against a hard skull. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, yeah. So that yeah, if you can afford a Bob or something similar, uh, or at least contribute to someone's wish list, like Evan said, that would be awesome.
And if you own a Bob already, but not the Bob versus, they do sell like arms you can buy and put on the Bob. So there's a Bob versus which has the arms and the legs, and then there's like the traditional Bob, which is basically a guy with no arms, and he's got I don't know, it's weird. It's just a torso, right? So the arms aren't in your way,
Mm-hmm.
but you still get the targeting. You just lack the obstacles of the arms. So, but you can buy essentially a vest with the arms that you can put on them.
Very cool. Very cool. Is it okay if I switch to a different topic?
Last one. Well, I'm gonna jump in the different topic for
For skill
skill
set.
set, or we?
Yeah, yeah, for skill
Yeah,
set.
go for it.
we were talking about equipment. I wanted to jump to online, either online training or in-person training. In-person training is obviously way more expensive because that means seminars, and most seminars are expensive. So if you're a generous person, buy your spouse or loved one admission to a seminar in person, because that to me is an awesome experience. Or buy them an online course. And obviously, Tiga Tactics, we offer a bunch of online courses, but I don't necessarily mean just my own. And so, therefore, I'm going to recommend a couple that aren't by Tiga Tactics. One of them is Pekiti University, and that is headed up by Tuhan Jared Wihangi. He is, disclaimer, he is my Kali instructor. And Pekiti University is their online platform for learning their system, our system of Kali or Filipino martial arts. And I believe it starts off at the $20 a month range, which is pretty decent and affordable. And that's a great way to learn a traditional system. If you're halfway across the world and there's not a single Filipino martial arts instructor, this is a great way to do it. The other system that Tuhan Jared offers is Tricom, which is more. It started off as just law enforcement training, defensive tactics, but he's since modified it to also teach civilians. And so it basically what he did was he took Kali, Jiu-Jitsu, some other things that he's learned, some Muay Thai, and kind of made it more reality-based combatives. And so those two platforms would be great. I think the pricing system is the same, roughly $20 a month. There's I think there's 3 tiers if I remember correctly. And the more you pay, obviously, the more information you get. But I think you also get like real-time Zoom training as well. So I highly recommend both of those. And then the third online training system that I would recommend is actually Michael Janich's Martial
Mm,
Blade Concepts,
mm.
which you have some experience in now. But I've trained with Michael Janich, I'd say 3 or 4 times in person. He's someone I call my friend. He works for Spyderco Knives, but he's also a very skilled martial artist himself, and probably one of the most intelligent martial arts instructors I've ever met. Like literally genius level. He will never admit it, but yeah, he's very smart. He's a former Army intelligence veteran. Worked for the various 3-letter agencies.
Did, yeah.
Super smart guy, and the way that he presents information is just so helpful. Um, he's actually, aside from me and Conrad, he's the only instructor. I'm sorry, aside from me, Conrad, and a group called International Solutions Group, which taught me executive protection. Aside from those 3 entities, Michael Janis is the only person who ever showed me real life footage as part of his curriculum.
Mm,
And that is essential if you want to really know how to defend yourself on the street, because everybody else is teaching you theory.
yeah.
I'd say, with the exception of Jared Wihangi, he doesn't show you the footage, but he has a lot of real world experience because he's a cop, and so he tells you the stories, and he backs that up with the physical techniques. But with Michael Janich, he's showing you actual footage, and so there's just no denying how people actually attack you on the street, and then therefore he presents a system that will defend against those attacks, very much like Tiga Tactics.
Yeah. I think more people have taken that model now. I'm not saying they stole it from Michael Janich, but more people are realizing the value in real
Mm-hmm.
world footage because some of the Blade stuff I've gone to have started using that and start showing it and being like, oh, here's what we can learn from this footage. Here's what we can learn from that footage. And
Right.
Michael Janich, I actually signed up just for the 1 month version of his Martial Blade concept stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and there is so much information on there. It is absurd. I mean, it is. There's a ludicrous amount of information. Like I've just been kind of like randomly clicking around. I signed up like 5 days ago,
Mm-hmm.
and it like the pages just keep going. Like I'm like overwhelmed with the amount of information on there. So I think it's that one's I think 25 a month,
Mm-hmm.
or if you pay for the year, I think you get more, but it's pretty expensive. It's actually more expensive than paying monthly, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of weird. But I think it unlocks a whole bunch of other stuff. I haven't quite figured it out yet.
Right.
And Pekiti University, I also just signed up for one of their like Tomahawk courses just because I thought that would be really fun.
Awesome.
Um, but yeah, they similar thing, 3 pricing tiers, and Tricom's courses are tend to be a little bit pricier.
Mm-hmm.
So Uh, they're just expensive courses, but I don't think, as far as I'm tracking, they don't have like a subscription thing. At least not that I've seen.
No, not with Tricom. Tricom are it's video on demand, so you just pay for it.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But
yeah,
yeah, no, just to respond to what you said earlier with footage, yeah, it's great that instructors now are incorporating real life footage into their curriculum because it will, like I said before, like the last, I'd say 15 years, nobody was really doing that except for a handful of people, Michael Janis being one of them. But now with social media, people are understanding, oh wow, we got to watch this footage because it's scary, and it's not
right.
the way that people, old school instructors, train it. So they're training you in hypotheticals, but on the street, it's a whole nother story.
Yeah. I, Piggybacking off of the online stuff, obviously, I recommend what I recommend in my books that's out, and then the ones that I have coming out. Obviously, recommend Tiga Tactics stuff first. I think it's just very streamlined. That's what you actually need to know.
Mhm.
That being said, I do like deep diving, and if you listen to this, you probably like deep diving as well into other topics. So for those, you got to go to other brands and get like a little more niche type stuff. Some of the ones I've really enjoyed are ShivWorks, Craig Douglas's stuff.
Mhm.
He teaches extreme close quarter shooting and kind of like a de-escalation course. And then Protect Your Nation is one by Byron Rogers. He's got some. It's just like a smattering of like. It's just a ton of various content from various people, and I really like a lot of his stuff. A lot of his stuff has opened doors and shown me people where I've now like deep gone down a rabbit hole like looking at that guy's content. So um,
Mhm.
I like his stuff as well. But
Yeah, yeah,
if anyone's curious about Blade online stuff, I feel like I have dug pretty far deep down that rabbit hole. Feel free to message me on social media, and I can give you a better rundown. I'm not going to go through it all now, though.
right. Do you cover any of that stuff in your Patreon page?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
I talk. I do like kind of reviews for different courses and things I've taken online, and share my thoughts. And I think everything I've taken honestly has been valuable online.
Mhm.
Where its value is different, right? So some of
Mhm.
them it was like I mentioned on the podcast, like I took Wing Chun online because I just wanted to know what was happening in Yip Man. Like that's all I wanted to know what the forms are. Like, what are you doing? Um,
Right.
am I going to use Wing Chun for self protection? I'm not. Do I think the principle of like being super aggressive and like pushing down the center line has
Mhm.
value in street combatives? Sometimes it does, yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes a person who's not trained very well, you can just steamroll over them.
Mhm.
But you try that against someone in like my Muay Thai class, they're just going to eat you up, right?
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
different.
Absolutely. Yeah. In terms of, again, not to pat ourselves on the back, but in terms of the Tiga Texas courses, what would you recommend? Since I have my own thoughts on that, but I'm one of the instructors. So,
Right.
what would you recommend for people who've never taken any of our courses?
My favorite one was EDC Knife, I think. But again, I like blade stuff, so I feel like I'm slightly biased on that.
Mhm.
But I thought EDC Knife just had a lot of really good stuff in it, and it's if you can't make it to one of the in-person training seminars, that's a really good option. I'd say second to EDC Knife would be the punch defense one, just
Mm.
because of it's just probability of attack, right? Everyone's got two fists on them all the times,
Yeah.
unless you have lost a hand or something, right? Or
Right.
born that way. But
Mhm.
uh, the probability of that, um, I'd say those would be my top two.
Cool. Cool. Yeah. Again, for those who never trained with us online, we have uh, a kind of like three tiers of courses. Our flagship courses are knife defense, punch defense, impact weapon defense, EDC knife, and now pistol defense course. And so the pistol defense course is how do you handle a gun threat when you're unarmed or you're empty-handed yourself. So those are the five. Then when you add in, we have three anti-grappling courses. When you add those together, that makes up the sixth flagship course. But we do have a bunch of entry-level ones like EDC pen, EDC flashlight, and then our mid tier, what I would call our mid tier course, is Fighting Chance Combatives, and that is designed for women and teens and people of smaller stature. again, I kind of hate, you know, separating people because the personal protection is personal protection.
Right. I agree.
But
Yeah.
I understand that as a male instructor, sometimes women want something that is specifically for them, and so that's what Fighting Chance Combatives is for. It's specifically for women or smaller people, and so that's a mid-tier course. Um,
And, and as a male, I actually still took that course because I wanted to know, I wanted to improve my teaching style for teaching other females,
mhm.
right? And you have Emily Chen on there helps teach the course, and she's got an absolutely crazy story. I'm not gonna go into it now, but she's got like she was on one of the Protector Nation podcast
Mhm.
episodes, and her story is like like it was so insane. I like stopped the car and was like, "Is this the same Emily from
Yeah.
Tiga Tactics?"
Yes, yes, yeah.
I was
So
just yeah. Oh,
yeah, so Emily Chen is a co-instructor on our Fighting Chance Combatives course. She's one of my longtime friends. She does have a pretty crazy background. We won't go into it here. Maybe we can invite her onto a future podcast, and
oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
she can explain it herself. But yeah, she was a she's definitely a survivor and a fighter, and so she's on that program with me, teaching the moves. And again, to show that, as a male instructor, it's easy for me to say, oh yeah, just kick him in the balls. It's super easy, but it's not. In reality, it's not that easy. And so we have Emily there. She's one of our combatives coaches. She's showing you the moves to show you that it can actually work for people who are smaller, for females. And that's to me the big thing. Like a lot of people say, oh, why do you call it women's self-defense? Self-defense is just self-defense. True, but at the same time, physics still wins. So if
Right.
you're only 5 foot and 95 pounds, the move that you need will be different from the move that I use because I'm 100, I'm like 80 pounds heavier than you, which will be a
Right.
different move if I were, say, 6'2" and 220 pounds, right? So the moves will be slightly different. The principles are the same though. So
Yeah. I mean, even so I'm 100 and just under 160. I'm like 158 right now.
mm-hmm.
And there are times in jiu-jitsu where some of the big guys will literally just push, they will literally push me off. And like sometimes my posture could be a little bit better and I could be
Right.
based a little bit better. But there are sometimes the guy like physically just like literally bench presses me away. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what? You know?
Yep.
Like holding on to his gi, trying to like, So yeah, physics matter and attributes do play a role. So
Yep.
it is nice to hear from a female who's on the smaller stature,
Yes.
and her real world story has essentially the topic is about sex trafficking. Essentially, if like her actual kind of background, it's such a crazy story,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and she's not like some like born in America, like American raised. She's not like some from some other country that was like fell into the system,
Right. Right. Yeah. She
right?
wasn't
Like
smuggled or anything. She's
right, yeah.
American.
It's she's American,
Yeah.
by birth.
Yeah.
Yeah, grew up here, and the story is so crazy. So,
Yeah.
let's start jumping over to tool set. Uh, Real quick, I'm gonna give two quick shout outs before we go over to that to two of the things I got from my trip to Dragon Fest,
Yeah.
uh, which were pretty cool gifts that I received, and I think they're great gifts for other people too.
Mm-hmm.
So Conrad bought us the Bruce Lee gloves from Enter the Dragon, right? Like,
Yes.
so a little bit on the price. You're about probably around 80-ish or more, depending on I guess where you get them from. But like
Yeah.
they are the Bruce Lee gloves. It's super cool.
Yeah.
If you're a Enter the Dragon Bruce Lee fan, that's like a really cool gift. And then you got me some Dit Dot Jow,
Mm-hmm.
uh, which I actually have not tried yet. I was waiting because in the military we're not supposed to have any CBD, and this one has a little bit of CBD. I
Mm-hmm.
was waiting until I retired, and which was a month ago, so now I can use it.
Nice.
Um, you want to tell people what that is real quick?
Yeah. Did that Jiao is basically like a Chinese liniment, and it's very common in kung fu systems. And you apply it after training to prevent or to dissipate bruises. And a lot of Asians use it for everything. It's kind of like a catch-all, cure for like, oh, I've got a sprain, I'll put Bida Jiao on it, or I'm sore here from whatever, I'm gonna put Bida Jiao on it. So it's kind of like, it's kind of like the Chinese version of Vicks vapor rub.
I need to start using that because every night I come back from jujitsu and I'm like, my body hurt, like everything hurts.
Right, right.
I'm just like, why are you doing this to yourself? It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, the original purpose is to dissipate bruises. And so that's kind of the main purpose of it. I to be honest, I very rarely use it nowadays because I don't bruise very easily anymore. And I can't say that's because I'm an iron shirt kung fu master. It just, I guess, over time doing contact sports and a lot of combat sports, I just don't bruise as often, so I don't use it as much. But I know other people use it for other things like sprains and things like that. So give it, you could give it a try and see if it works for you in that way.
All right, let's jump into tool set. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Wow. There's so many. Like we could honestly do like 3 episodes on just this topic alone on what tool sets you can gift somebody else. But I'll start again. We'll do the same thing. We'll start at the affordable level and work our way up. So at the very base, I would recommend getting people pens because pens are actually cheap. You don't have to go
That's a
super
good one.
expensive. Just get them a pen, and it could be, you can go as cheap as a Sharpie, which costs like $3 maybe. And a Sharpie is an excellent improvised weapon because it's super solid, well, not a single piece of plastic, but it's almost a single piece of solid plastic that makes for an excellent self-defense tool, and it's an everyday object. Like you take that onto the plane or in a courthouse, they're not going to be like, oh, that's illegal, you can't take it in. They're going to let it pass. As long as it's a real Sharpie. There are certain companies now that make look-alike Sharpies, but
Yeah, I
inside is
do.
actually a really sharp piece of plastic that comes to a point. It's basically a spike. If
Yeah.
if you get caught with that, you might have some legal troubles. But if it's a real Sharpie that actually writes, no problem. So yeah, I would recommend pens. You can start as low as a Sharpie. I wouldn't recommend anything flimsy or anything with a dollar store. Sharpies are great. Then you could kind of work your way up. There's a brand that I actually forgot to mention in a previous episode. It's called Atomic Bear,
Oh,
and
I like that. I like their stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and it costs about $10. It's made out of aluminum. Super solid pen. And most of them look like regular pens. Most Atomic Bear models are pretty cool looking. They just look like regular pens made out of aluminum. Great for smashing people in the face. Um, and then you can go up from there. Obviously you can go all the way up to $200. I've seen some like custom made ones for like $400, which is kind of ridiculous to me. But when you want to get to the higher end, then I would recommend Tough Writer, Tough TUFF, and then Writer as if you're writing something. That's a great brand, uh, super high quality. They all come with really good ink too, so that you can actually use it for writing, the main purpose. And they, for the most part, they all look like just ordinary pens. And I've taken them on pretty much every plane ride I've been on, and have never gotten it questioned ever.
Yeah. My recommendation, the one Atomic Bear pen I have that I like is called the Rebel. It
Hmm.
looks very non-tactical. Not something I would carry on a plane because the point is actually a glass breaker tip, and I think
Hmm.
if they saw that, they would take it away.
Yes.
That being said, it looks like a normal pen, um, from a distance, or even from holding it, until you actually like start examining and like touching the tip and unscrewing the top. I like that one, and then my go-to one is from Everyman.
Hmm.
It Not a tactical pen company. They're just like really hard-bodied pens, and they're generally more affordable. So I know, like, I'm sure Tough Rider's actually probably nicer, but the price range is higher. I think Everyman runs around 40 bucks. So
Nice. Nice. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like that one.
That's a pretty decent range. It should last you a while. Tough Rider pens tend to be $100 or more.
Yeah,
And
I made it that hard.
yeah, there's also a range of pens like the traditional classic cross pens or Mont Blanc pens. Those can obviously get very expensive, but they do offer some in the $40-$50 range. They're made out of steel or aluminum as well. So
My
uh,
my issue with some of the cross pens is the ones I've seen, the where you put your thumb is just really small, so
mm-hmm.
the impact point is just a little bit too hard. Um, I'm not saying there's not better models out there, but I don't know one off the top of my head. What I'm
Right,
saying.
right. And then shall we jump into a different genre?
Sure.
Yeah. So then the next recommendation, after pen would be flashlights. I carry a flashlight literally everywhere I go because they are very practical. You know, at nighttime you can find, like, you drop your keys or you can't find your wallet underneath the seat, something like that. They're very just practical tools to have, but they're also what I call projectiles. So at nighttime, if someone creepy is approaching you, you can just blast them full of light and keep them at distance. And you know, another episode we did talked about the different real life scenarios that happened to my students, and but because I taught them how to use a flashlight, they were able to basically defend themselves at a distance, so they didn't have to get hands on. So I highly recommend flashlights, and they can range, again, just like pens. They can range in price from, you know, as cheap as, say, $15 to $20 all the way up to $500. Um, so I would recommend my favorite brands because they're a nice balance between quality and price, and that's Streamlight. Streamlight lights are made in China, but you would have no clue if it didn't have that stamping on it. It feels and works like it's made in America, super high quality, and all their MSRPs, all their listed prices are high on the website. But if you go to Amazon, you can get it for like half the price. So some of my favorite flashlights from Streamlight are roughly around the $50 range, and they have a variety from like the big tactical ones to more everyday carry EDC style, and so there's all kinds that you have. But there's other brands too out there, um, like Coast, the Surefire, which are more expensive. Meg Light, the original tactical light. There's Nightcore, Phoenix. So there's a whole bunch out there. But I think a flashlight would make an excellent gift.
That is a good one. And if you want the full deep dive, again, the flashlight, the Tiga Tactics has a flashlight course, right? You within that course, you do like a show and tell where you go shoot through a bunch of the ones you have and kind of explain some of the things you like and dislike about them. And I think that's a really good way to for people to understand. I also like to give gifts sometimes as packages, right? So like
Hmm.
a good idea is like, all right, I bought you this pen and also this, EDC pen course, right? And
Hmm.
that, so especially if you're, in my family, we tend to buy multiple gifts for people.
Right.
So a lot of times I will pick a theme and like buy several things within that theme and then give that as the gift. And then I don't have to be like, oh, well, I got you fruit from this place and flowers, and then I bought you socks, and then I bought you I don't know, whatever, right? If you pick a theme, you can just deep dive that theme and give them everything they need, and then some things that may necessarily wouldn't necessarily be considered a present suddenly become presents because it's part of that overall package.
Right. That's very cool. That's a great idea. I'm gonna have to do
Yeah,
that going forward.
yeah. Well, the one of the ones I remember not good for martial arts, but I one year I bought my sister essentially shot glasses, pint glasses, Guinness, and then Bailey's for Irish car bomb. Oh, and whiskey. Right. It's like
Mm,
I just bought her like the full Irish car bomb drink set
right.
essentially, and that covered like, oh, Christmas is done. Right. Right. You have to buy like 80 different things. It was just like, here you
Right.
go.
Yep. Very smart.
Yeah. One of there's a brand called Stinger that does Kubotons. They do pens. They do flashlights. Then they do some crazy stuff like like self-defense whips. Like it's like a handle, but it's got like like a steel cable. Not I wouldn't recommend that. But their flashlight, they have one it's a combination flashlight, Kubotan, glass breaker, and seatbelt cutter. So essentially like a car
Mm,
tool.
mhm,
I really like that one because the tip is sharp. Like you
mm,
can if you hit someone with that, you'd cut them
mhm,
100%.
mhm.
But I like that especially again just like a regular flashlight, an impact flashlight, you can walk around at night in a city with that physically in your hand, and then you don't have to fight to your weapon. It's
Right.
already in your hand. And the way that one is designed, I can access the flashlight, and my thumb just basically slides on top, and now it's an impact because the bottom side is the impact. I
Nice.
just like the design of that one. So
Very cool. Very cool.
yeah, training knives are another one I would recommend. Tend to be lower cost than most live blades, so it allows you to get some reps in and train safely. I know when I started collecting knives long before I started training with knives, and there were times I've gotten gifts like specifically as I've gotten like a training knife as a gift and being like, well, I don't really need this. And then fast forward it like a year and I was like, oh, this was a really good gift in hindsight.
Right.
I was like, oh, sometimes if in the topic, I've gotten gifts that I not necessarily wanted at that time, but like fast forward a couple of years and it's been valuable. So
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I think if you're a knife collector, you got to have at least one training knife, even if
100%.
even if you're not a martial artist, because you have to understand that if you're carrying a knife every day, there's a good chance, not a good chance, but there is a chance that you might need it to defend yourself, and it's better to have done that training way in advance than at that moment when you're like, oh, I have a knife, this guy's attacked me, what do I do? So you don't want to end up cutting yourself in that situation.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
training is definitely important.
all right. Let's start wrapping it up. What else you got? You got one more maybe before we kind of close it out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, we could spend the whole episode on knives and different knife gifts. Just keep in mind, there's tons out there. Maybe you can look at our other episodes or our social media, and we talk about different knives that you can gift. Also, obviously our EDC knife course where we have recommendations there. The other gift, I don't know how many people would actually gift this for self defense enthusiasts, but there are firearms. Obviously, that depends on your state and the different laws involved. But if you gift me a firearm, oh my god, like I
That's a
will I will be indebted to you for life. To me that's like the ultimate gift because they are so expensive. They're obviously the most effective self-defense tool you could have as an individual, but also they're very expensive. If you get them brand new, it's going to cost you hundreds of dollars. If you get the ones that I really want, they'll cost you thousands of dollars.
yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely an option. But again, only if you're super generous or you're a millionaire.
What's funny is we didn't talk about what we were going to suggest before this episode,
Mm-hmm.
and the one I had on my list was actually a firearms training tool, just like a training knife. It's a SIRT pistol, so
Yes.
it's a laser pistol essentially, and it's self-resetting trigger. So, problem with a lot of the snap caps that you load into the gun. Yes, you're using your actual gun, but now you're building habits of every time I pull the trigger, I have to reach up and rack the slide
Mm-hmm.
to reset the trigger. So I don't like that. I'd rather have a slightly different version of the gun I'm using that is very similar. And SIRT pistol to me uh, is the ultimate as far as like price range and value that I've used. Where essentially it's a laser pistol, and every time you pull the trigger, the laser fires. You can have it so it when you pull the beginning of the trigger, it sends out a laser.
Mm-hmm.
Or I actually turn that off, but it lets you know basically if you're pulling out all the slack before the actual laser fires. So
Right.
I have that, and I also have Mantis X. I think has a
Mm-hmm.
uh, one that like you can hook up to your phone and it tells you where the impacts are going.
Mm-hmm.
The SIRT pistol like, is to me is the hands down because I don't have to set anything up. Like I can literally walk into my house, grab my SIRT pistol, shoot at a couple of random things in my house with the laser as a couple of reps, and then put it down. Like I don't have to set anything up. Requires no. I mean, it's immediate. It's immediate feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Yeah.
So
Again, I also wholeheartedly recommend it. And CERT is spelled SIRT, CERT
yep.
pistol. I also highly recommend it. It's just a great training tool, and the owner Mike Hughes is a really good dude. And
Couple $100 though. Just a heads up.
yeah, yeah, it's
But
in the
worth it.
hundreds. Totally worth it.
Worth it.
Totally worth it. And they also have a conversion kit that you can use to have AR-15 style training weapons as well. So
And when I visited Patrick let me sleep in that room, and he's lucky I didn't steal it because it was calling my name.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's an excellent recommendation if you have a loved one who is a firearms enthusiast.
Yeah. All right. We gotta get go. I gotta get going. To be specific, any final shout outs we need to give before we sign off?
No, I think we pretty much named most of them in this episode as we went along. So I just want to thank all of those people who kind of helped us get to where we are, and me as a knife reviewer and gear reviewer, they've donated a lot of things for me to review, and so I appreciate all of that. I appreciate your time, Evan, obviously, and all your expertise, and of course to thank you to Conrad who couldn't make this episode, but he was a huge influence on a lot of the things that I train in and I use that I mentioned in this episode.
And we'll try to drop some. I'm not going to drop all the links because that's a lot of stuff, and I'm with that time. But I will drop some links in the show notes down below for some of the products we talked about, just to kind of help you direct you, so you don't have to go back and fidget through and find the exact moment we talked about each one. So check out the show notes down below, and buy some martial arts gifts for people, and have a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
Yes, have a great one, guys. Be safe, stay humble, stay kind.